Now, Prometheus is a movie that I have a very love-hate relationship with. When the movie first came out, I went to see it in IMAX, and it was the first time in my life I had ever considered walking out of a movie theater because I was that unhappy with the movie. But I stuck it out till the very end for one reason, it's because Prometheus was the most visually stunning movie I had ever seen in my life up until that point. And I'm glad I stayed in the theater for that movie because otherwise I would have missed one of the most horrific scenes in cinema history. Now, this movie is a prequel to Alien. Prequel, in a sense, I guess, because it takes place before the first movie. It follows a team of scientists going to some coordinates called LV-223, essentially looking for what they call the engineers, which were previously known as the space jockey, which was the alien in the ship that held the xenomorph eggs in the first movie. And this movie is a massive lore dump when it comes to the series, because we find out that possibly humans came from engineered DNA due to this black goo that has different properties depending on which movie it's in. And there have been many theories about it. My personal opinion about what the mutagen is I think it's something that accelerates evolution, except what it's trying to do is no matter what you feed it, it just wants to create xenomorphs. This is why the engineers knew what a xenomorph was, why there's a mural showing you a xenomorph. I think what the goo does is it keeps hopping between hosts like a parasite until it has all the genetic material needed to create a xenomorph. Kind of like a reverse tree of life, if you catch my drift, where it just keeps creating parasitic life forms like the hammerpede, the trilobite, face huggers, until eventually it has all the materials it needs to create a xenomorph, and that's what it keeps producing. But that's just my own personal explanation for it. I'm pretty sure everyone has their own reasoning for it. But the main characters in this movie, Elizabeth Shaw and her partner Holloway, I felt were great characters. Honestly, Elizabeth Shaw, probably one of the best protagonists in the entire franchise, in my opinion. I think it's a real shame she wasn't brought back for Covenant. But I understand why they cut her, but I'll get into that in my next review. David is possibly my favorite character in the entire franchise. As far as the evil androids go, I think he has the most development because he's in two different movies. But I really like how his motivations are like a mirror of the story of Frankenstein, with the creation destroying its creator, and how, that's a reflection of essentially what the engineers were fearing, right? As a fan of Gothic horror and a big fan of the book Frankenstein, I loved all the references to that. And like I said already, visually, this movie is incredible. Like the way it's shot, the way it's framed, every scene. Ridley Scott fucking outdone himself with Prometheus, in my opinion. Like, we all knew he was a very visually creative director with his other works, like Gladiator, but I think Prometheus is the one that, and I think it's because I did get to see it in IMAX, it's the one that really blew me away when I watched it. But I still have problems with the movie, and I think I can attribute the root of all those problems back to Ridley Scott as well. So my main issue is with the writing. Overall, the story is great. I think the story works. But the way the characters are written, it's just something I can't ignore. Because we have a team of scientists, we even see them get debriefed on protocol and stuff in the movie before they get off the actual ship and explore those ruins. And I can't think of any reason why they would do the things they did other than to advance the plot. And I was willing to forgive that sort of thing in the previous movies because the reasons given were very human reasons, like emotional panic and stuff, which is why people do make those mistakes. But I think Prometheus took it a little too far and made characters dumb in situations where they shouldn't have been, just to advance plot points. The most obvious example being a scientist who knows about animals encounters an alien cobra like creature hissing at him and decides to prod and poke it, which is the most irresponsible thing you can do. And it's that kind of writing that really pulled me out of what was essentially an amazing movie, which unfortunately gets tarnished by things like that. But I guess over time I have become more forgiving towards Prometheus, mainly because with the context of Covenant existing, it does make it easier to appreciate certain things in Prometheus a lot more when you see where they lead to in this following movie. And the cast was incredibly strong. We had people like Idris Elba, Michael Fassbender, Pearce as Old Man Wayland, Like, despite its very obvious flaws, it has a lot going for it. Now, I do have issues with the ending as well, which I'm sure a lot of people had. Like, legitimately, could they not add like an extra 2 minutes to the movie where the engineer gets back up, gets on a ship, and then flies and crashes on LV-426 to literally make it a prequel to Alien? But for some reason, they chose not to. They chose to have it give birth to a proto-xenomorph called a Deacon on that planet, and then they don't really do anything with that Deacon. In fact, if you want to know what happens to that Deacon, in the Alien tabletop role playing game by Free League Publishing, they have an official timeline of the series and they have a catalog of all the different xenomorph types. And apparently, according to that rulebook, the Deacon just keeps growing on that planet on its own until it eventually becomes a living mountain. And it's too big to move anymore, which is kind of a disappointing end to that whole thread. But another point I will give to this movie is it does have some of the most graphic moments in the entire series, and I fucking love it. Like seeing that abortion scene with Elizabeth Shaw and the trilobite being pulled out of her in IMAX was genuinely horrific. And I think watching it in IMAX definitely gave it a bigger impact because even subtle things like when Holloway looks in the mirror and he has that little worm swimming around in his eye looked so much more graphic when you have it blown up on a big screen in much higher detail. I think it wouldn't have the same impact if you watched it on a streaming service on TV. And I know there's a popular joke about the movie that CinemaSins made popular with the whole Prometheus school of running away from things in regards to why didn't they run diagonally away from the ship as it was rolling towards them, which might seem silly if you just look at it at face value, but you have to remember the terrain there was uneven, and if you were in that moment, you'd probably choose to run downhill, not try and climb uphill. Like, I don't think there's anyone out there who thinks they can climb up a steep incline fast enough to get out of the way of that rolling ship in time. Whereas running downhill is surprisingly easy, especially after you just had an abortion less than half an hour ago, and you still have stitches to heal. But apart from a good handful of the side characters, I felt the cast was very strong. The character was a great Idris Elba as the pilot of their ship. He was fantastic. I thought he was one of the more likable characters. Holloway is the one character I'm willing to forgive because he is guilty of doing some of the silly things like taking off his helmet and breathing the alien air, regardless of bacteria and stuff. But that is in line with his established character. So I'm willing to forgive it there. It's only when you have the character that's too cautious to take his helmet off is suddenly willing to poke an alien cobra. Or I have to say, now this is just stupid. And it's inconsistent with the character that was established. Because that dude was cautious throughout the entire movie, right up until he saw that thing, decided, hey, this is where I should throw all logic and reason out of the window. I thought Charlize Theron was also great in the movie as Waylon's daughter that he doesn't want to acknowledge because he keeps calling David his son directly in front of her. It's really cleverly written because he's insulting both of them at the same time because David's not a real boy because he's an android. So he insults both David and his daughter Vickers in the same breath. But this is an odd movie to place in the timeline and just how I feel about it being part of the franchise because even on its own, if you rated it just as its own thing, it's a pretty good movie. Flaws aside, I'd say it's a very solid 7, maybe 8 out of 10. That gets let down by a few plot points and poorly written side characters, but they are kind of minor in the grand scheme of things, so I shouldn't really be holding it against the movie too much. I don't think I'd rate it higher than Alien or Aliens, but I'd definitely put it up there with one of my favorites, purely because it's a very stunning movie. Up still to this day, it looks amazing. Even when I was rewatching it, the establishing shots are still very breathtaking. But I understand why people might not like it, especially as part of the franchise, because it does poke more holes in it and leaves you with more questions than answers. And I know it's a lot less popular with a lot of the fans, because it sort of messes with the origin of the Xenomorphs a little and sort of muddies the lore, which up until then was very well established and nobody really had any problems with it or any real questions. But overall, I'm glad this movie got made, despite the fact that I was not happy with it when it first came out. I have grown to love it, and just really appreciate it for what Ridley Scott was trying to do with this movie. But I think this is the one I'm most curious about. Let me know in the comments below what you personally thought of this movie and how you feel about it, and if your opinion of it has actually changed since its release, because mine certainly did. But that's been my review of Prometheus. I'll be doing Alien Covenant next. If you want to see that, please do subscribe so you'll be first to know when that video drops. I do also live stream on this channel. If you want to chat to me directly, feel free to do so whenever I'm live. And check out some of my other videos while you're here. And I'll see you in the next one. Sayonara.